So welcome to today's show, everyone, and we are super excited to introduce you to our guest today, Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, who is an entrepreneur, international speaker, and artist. Kristina also co-founded Mindvalley, starting as a small meditation business operating out of her apartment in New York. The company quickly grew into a global education organization offering top training for peak human performance for hundreds of thousands of students all around the world. Now, Kristina believes life is too important to be taken seriously and makes sure to bring fun into every one of her roles as a teacher, a mother, an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and world traveler. Now, Kristina helps her students to virtually hack happiness by taking them through her unique framework, which is Hacking Happiness, a unique framework for balancing your life, taking in every moment and paying close attention to the small daily choices. So welcome to the show, Kristina. We are super excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me, for introducing me. And it was very beautifully written bio. I haven't heard it before, so thank you for this. Wherever you got it from, it's a compliment.
Excellent. I'm glad you liked it.
It's so good to have you here. We've been really excited about this interview. I'm sure this conversation is going in many different directions, but we'll try and obviously keep ourselves on track here. So what I'd love really is for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, Jonathan's introduced you, but it's always nice for our listeners just to hear from you and any kind of key things you think our listeners need to know about you.
Yes, it's a good question, even though I get to answer it so often that sometimes it doesn't sound genuine anymore. At least it feels like that. Just for the background, I was born in Soviet Union a long time ago when Soviet Union was still a thing. So that kind of influences a lot of my background. I know you guys wanted to know how did I end up in Mindvalley and with Mindvalley and an idea or personal growth per se. And I have to tell you as it is, which is by accident. It wasn't really what I dreamt of, because when I was a child in Soviet Union, I wanted to be a diplomat, partially because Soviet Union was behind the Iron Curtain. So I thought diplomat means I'll get to travel the world. So I guess that wasn't really my dream, to be in personal growth, to be in business, because that's not what I grew up with. So as a student, I got acquainted with Vishen, who became my husband and then became not my husband after a while. But he was the one who dreamt up Mindvalley and started the business. And I was along the way helping him until this very moment. And you did mention that it grew very quickly from a meditation side to what it is right now, but it actually happened 18 years ago. So it's been quite a while. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we think or what you see from the outside compared to that journey. Now, I'm sure that journey must be so interesting for you, considering that wasn't your dream. You kind of ended up going along for the ride and no doubt contributing massively to what Mindvalley is today. But what is how has that journey been for you? Like that's because you know that our community, we talk about stress a lot, right? That must have brought up a kind of a few pressure points along the way. Is there any kind of pivotal moments or key things you might want to share for us?
This question answering this question would basically mean answering about my whole life. How has your life been so far? Because 18 years is a long time, and it's the second part of my life which was grown up and well, hopefully, and in a new environment. So it is pretty much all my life. But how has it been? I think I'm lucky in a way, for whatever reason, because I'm okay with stress. That's not to say that I haven't experienced stress. I've had my episodes of anxiety and well, not diagnosed, but depression-like episodes in life. But generally, when it comes to business and money, maybe because I came from a very bizarre country, which had not very healthy relationships with money. We were building communism, which a lot of people don't know, but the initial idea of communism was to build a society without money. So everything there is for free for everyone. So maybe because of that, I have very strange relationship with money. I've never had stress about it. My whole life, I've never stressed about how am I going to pay the bills, or when it comes into business, of course, it's a little more pressure because you have people, you have different level of responsibilities. But somehow I like to say I'm like the British Queen. I live in the world where money is just an abstract concept. It's not a real thing. So I guess because of that, my journey has been rather easy, which is not the case for Vishen. He was a little more responsible in that whole story. I guess he has had his level of stress, but yeah, it's been up and down. It's like anything, but that's what life is supposed to be. It's like, you know, there's day, there's night, there's winter, there's summer. So there is smooth riding, and sometimes it's challenging, and it's all been good.
I am so happy that you mentioned that, because these ebbs and flows of life are very natural, and I think there's so much out there at the moment, social media, just generally in society, is that we must be on this absolute high, otherwise what are we doing with life, you know? But there must be a problem. So I'm so happy that you actually mentioned that, because I think that's actually really, really important. And something else that you mentioned there is like your relationship with money is like almost this abstract thing. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why maybe it's not stressful, because we put so much premise on these things, whether it's money, job, career, like whatever, but we just attach ourselves so much to these things, when actually if we really strip it all back, what is this all about, you know?
But I have to confess, yes, I am okay with money, I'm okay with career. Somehow I've always had this approach that it doesn't matter, we'll figure things out somehow. But I do have one area in my life where I do tend to have stress inexplicably, which is relationships. That's where you can poke me if you want to get if you want to get to me.
Well, I'd definitely be curious to know, in terms of like what kinds of stress in relationships, and what have you done to navigate that? I mean, it's probably an ongoing process, because I think we all have certain areas in life where it's always going to be an ongoing thing. But is there anything that you've come up with, or you've found that really works for you, for anybody else that's listening that could be struggling with stress?
You know, I don't consider myself actually even qualified to talk about relationships, because I think I'm rather silly in relationships. When I care about people, I lose all common sense, and I lose my ability to feel things, or to trust my intuition. Actually, I do feel things, but I don't trust what I feel anymore. So I guess the only area in relationships where I'm doing okay is friends and parenting. But when it comes to not friends so depending on the type of friend, I am very loyal, and I have problems with being a little bit too accepting. So I've had a history of having friends who were not healthy to my to me, but well, the friends were okay, but the relationship wasn't good, and I do have a lot of patience with that. So yeah, it's I don't have hacks, because I'm still a student in this field, and here I do tend to be more in the student position than in sharing. When it comes to happiness or your relationship with yourself, or even entrepreneurship, that's where I sometimes share my hacks.
I love it.
But that's where I don't feel stress.
Exactly. But I'm sure that, I mean, we're going to find out, right, as we continue talking, but I'm sure there's some transferable skills there that may well...
I feel like a nut that you're trying to crack right now.
Not at all.
No, definitely not. Like I say, especially when it comes to relationships, like everyone is constantly learning and adapting and learning how to be in relationships. Like even the most enlightened people in the world still are learning new ways to be able to connect and have relationship with people, because it's impossible to figure it out 100%. There's always a learning curve. You're always going to find new ways. People change, people adapt, and you've got to change with it. And that's what happens. People start off together, aligned, and somewhere along the line, that alignment, they start to drift away in terms of what they want, what's aligned with their needs. And that's natural, it's normal. And in some cases, it's just being able to recognize that and become aware of it, and understanding that not all relationships, like just because the relationship is no longer viable or no longer aligned, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's acknowledging that and not seeing it as a bad thing and thinking, oh no, what's going on? We're not connecting anymore, whether it's like a love relationship, whether it's friends, whether it's family. And like you said, you went down that route of kind of being so loyal to a point where you had people in your life who were becoming unhealthy for you. And we all go through that. We've all been there. We've all been guilty of hanging on for too long and letting it affect us in a negative way, or it's not serving us anymore. It's not that relationship becoming toxic. So it's knowing when to kind of just step back from that and say, okay, I love this person, but I need my distance now. I need that separation. I've got to focus on my own health here, my mental health, emotional health. And I think everyone if everyone could just realize that it's okay. It might not feel nice at the time, but it's okay. It's like, it's normal for stuff like that to happen. We drift apart, we drift together, and as long as we can see it and take it for what it is, and kind of go with it from a level of compassion, and we can still stay close to these people without being with them every single day, if we know that that relationship's coming a little bit toxic. So for ourselves, well, myself especially, I've had that with family, where I know I have to separate myself from certain people in my family, because the more time I spend with them, I feel my own anxiety and my own stress levels starting to rise and stay at a high level. So I know I need time away, and I need a lot of time away sometimes, and that's okay. So, and no one has all the answers. And the good thing about everyone sharing their experiences with relationships, because someone can pick up on that and go, oh, okay, that's a good idea, I might try that, or that's interesting, this person's experiencing what I'm experiencing. So I think the main thing is people want to know they're not alone in feeling what they're feeling or experiencing what they're feeling.
You know, I do have two remarks about that, because I went through a divorce process a few years ago, and I know one thing, that when it comes to romantic relationships, at least, our societies are still very full of dogmas and taboos areas. So we don't discuss this topic well enough, or openly enough, or honestly enough for us to even be able to navigate this situation. So one life hack that I can share, which helped me a lot, is we're little absolutists when it comes to relationships. It's either all or nothing. So very often, if a relationship ends, we also equate it to failure, especially if it's a romantic relationship. And one thing that really helps with relationship is value what you have built throughout it. And when it ends, because all relationship end at some point. If it's not in separation, it's in death. Then value the fact of what this relationship has given you, and don't write it off as a failure. And I think that helps a lot, because, you know, if you've spent, let's say, 10 years with someone, 10 of your best years with someone, and then you separate, then it is so tempting to say, like, why did I waste this time? But it wasn't wasted. Another thing which I wanted to remark, and it's a little bit different, because I'm not, as I said, I don't usually talk about relationships, mostly because I'm a student in that field. But I do talk about relationship itself, and I do have a theory. Yes, I have tried to distance myself from some people in my life because they trigger me. But I also understand that despite their quirks and weirdnesses and whatever makes me triggered, they're just people. And my attitude to them is about me. It's not about them. So I like to say that my relationship with the world is actually a mirror reflection of my relationship with me. So whenever I notice that I get irritated or snappy, or I tend to be cynical about other people, for me, it's always a sign to look inside and try to figure out, okay, what is inside me? So I'm settled that I am reacting like that to the world around me. Because in 18 years in personal growth, if there's anything I've learned, it's this one very simple equation. The more at peace you are with yourself, the easier it is to be at peace with the world, even no matter how messed up the world is. And again, we have to understand that when I say at peace, it doesn't mean I don't want to change something. But that's a different story. You can want to change while being at peace with what you have. So for me, that's also one of the things that I like about relationships. While I don't endeavor to analyze the good and the bad and what works, what doesn't work, what I know for a fact, they're always a mirror reflection of my relationship to myself. So whenever I have issues with people in my life, for me, it's a great starting point, a great thread to pick up and try to figure out, okay, what's going on in me?
That is nice. so powerful, honestly. Like if we could all adopt that, I would love to say 100% of the time. How incredible would that be if we actually turned inward to figure out what the problem is, instead of poke blame or just express it sometimes in a less resourceful way? What would you say to somebody that's maybe listening to this and they're not sure how to do that? So okay, they maybe heard what you've said there, and they're like, okay, well, my problem isn't John. The problem is in Charlotte, right? So where do I start? When I notice that I'm triggered, what would you say to somebody like me in your experience?
God, it's such a deep question, because we could talk about that for a long time, and it's not a simple answer. The simple answer would be that, yes, your problem isn't John or Charlotte. It never is. It's always, it's always somewhere inside, but that is not to say that there are no bad people in the world, or that there are no bad situations, or, okay, bad maybe is a bad word, but let's say uncomfortable, unpleasant, unfair, unjust, whatever. Of course, there are circumstances which you would like to change, but usually the problem is within you. But it is a philosophical thing, of course, and you can't, philosophy helps when everything else fails, then philosophy helps, and humor. These are the two, my two to-go methods if everything else is really horrible. But it requires training. It requires you to keep reminding yourself of that. And you need a balance, because there is no recipe in life. Do like this and you'll be happy. Always look at yourself and you'll be happy. No, there are some really genuinely disgusting people that I don't want to have in my life. It's okay. It's okay. The question is that if it triggers you, why does it trigger you? You meet people you disagree with, you don't like, you can't share. I do not know what your thing is. In my case, I have really hard times with homeless people. For me, it's really painful. Because I don't understand. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me, and I feel kind of helpless. So what do we do if we come across something that we don't like? We usually ignore. It's like it disappears from our worldview, which is also actually an interesting thing, because maybe I should ask myself, what is there that triggers me that I can't even acknowledge the fact that there are people who are like that, who exist. But let's say if I said that, Charlotte, this greenish blue hair doesn't work on you, you would think like, what's wrong with you, right? Because I'm not triggering anything inside you which rings a bell, which sounds like it could be truth, which sounds that it could actually make you question your choices or your values or whatever you are. So if it doesn't trigger anything in you, you usually ignore it. It doesn't exist. It's like you're just being weird. Why are you saying something so strange? But on the other hand, we also have to not go too deep down this rabbit hole, because you can't always turn inside and always be in your head. And occasionally you need to make a move. You need to set a boundary. You need to say what your values are. But it has to come not from blaming the other person, but from valuing yourself. So let's say if somebody is snappy at work with me all the time, let's say they are rude to me, they are sometimes unreasonable, I could say it in a way that, you're being rude and reasonable. This is disgusting. I don't like it. Here's my boundary. Or I could say, I don't appreciate when I'm being treated this way. And that comes not from blaming the other person, but from reminding yourself of your values, of what is important to you. So if I'm setting a boundary, I'm not setting a boundary because I judge you as the wrong person. I'm setting a boundary because whatever there is, it doesn't gel with me. Yeah. It is not about, it becomes about my values. So it's important to remember that, yes, you only triggered if there is something inside you which responds. Yeah. If it doesn't respond, you won't get triggered. And the second thing, you still have to make a move sometimes. Yeah. Just because it's about you doesn't mean you don't have to react to what's happening.
Yeah, 100%. I especially that second one that you mentioned there is, I experienced that when I was coming out of the kind of corporate fitness space. So I was working responsible for like 600 staff across multiple countries, and it was a high pressure environment, high pressure team and setup. And I got to a point where I was getting triggered very, very easily. And I went down that rabbit hole of, okay, look inward. What is it about me? Why am I struggling with this? Why is this not working? And I exhausted myself in that rabbit hole to the point where I got to a point where I felt like I'd resolved all of those things. And then I was like, okay, well, I've cleaned up a lot of my stuff. Now, I'm sure there's still plenty to be cleaned up, right? We're all human. But the reality is I realized what you said there. I realized, what do I value? What is in misalignment with me? And that was when it was time for me to spread my wings, as it were, and to leave that space. And not because that was bad, but just because it, like you said, it just didn't gel. And I think there's a lot of people listening to this that can be stuck in relationships, in situations, at work, wherever, and they kind of have that little battle of that, is it me? Can I just work on myself and then I will be able to be okay here? And sometimes you're right though, sometimes it is a case of making the move. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Really, really helpful.
You know, I have this beautiful tool for situations like that, because I'm too much in my head. I should get out of it more often. So, you know, one of my job titles is everyday life philosopher. So I philosophize about everything, even about losing a phone. So I have a little life hack. I read it somewhere on Instagram or Facebook, I don't remember, anonymous internet meme. And it says, shit doesn't have to make sense. And I think it's perfect because our brain always wants to make sense, but sometimes it's good to remind yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense.
Yeah, definitely. And then you just feel the stress fall away.
Exactly. It doesn't always have to be a why behind everything. It's just accept it, surrender to it. And yeah, and then obviously beautiful things can happen, and obviously that sense of calm and relaxation. What I want to touch on, I want to stay with this message of looking within, and I want to kind of talk about happiness. It's something that you're very passionate about, is hacking happiness and helping people to find their happiness, or should we say be happy. You already mentioned it when you were talking earlier about what people are always looking for is, if this happens or I get this or I find this, I'm going to be happy. But we know happiness isn't a destination, it's not a process, it's about being. So I would love to obviously kind of touch on now is what is hacking happiness, because I know you have a blueprint for this. So what does that look like? What is hacking happiness for you? How do you do that? How do you help people hack their happiness?
Well, there are two ways to answer that. The way number one is logistical. It just happened so that I ended up on big stage with the topic of happiness, just because I kind of had a beautiful, simple algorithm which people liked. So that's why this topic got a little bit stuck with me. I don't mind. I like it. Then there is the second, a more deep answer to that is I think that happiness is an important thing, which is being incredibly undervalued in contemporary society. So we can talk about how to feel more happy, how to be more happy, how to make it last. We could talk about that, but we have to start with the very beginning. Is it really important for people? So I lived 16 years in Asia, and in Asia, Chinese culture particularly, they have this little thing for happiness. They actually do appreciate happiness. It is part of the cultural like mentality to want to be happy. Whereas I was born in Soviet Union, and actually I grew up on the classical literature, Russian classical literature, which is all about suffering and martyrdom, and going through pain and breaking and becoming better. So I kind of see the both sides. But the thing is that if you think of the person that you love the most, and you ask yourself, what would you like for that person? So in my case, it's my two children. As any normal, regular mother, I probably would say I would like my children to be happy. Of course, it's a different question if I can do that, but that's beside the point. Like if I had a magic wand, what would I wish for them is to be happy. Happiness is something which we wish to each other. Happy birthday, happy anniversary, happy Tuesday, happy Friday. That's what we say all the time. Yet, if you look at your goals for 2022 or for 2021 or 10 years ago, I bet that very few people have happiness written in there, because as a topic, it's considered fluffy, something elusive, something even unimportant. Somehow when you talk, like if you were doing an interview on goals, or let's say workshop with a lot of people and they were setting goals, and you ask them to share, almost everybody would share something that they could be proud of. I want so many millions on my bank account, build a business, solve that problem. When it comes to happiness, we almost feel ashamed to even admit that I want to do anything for my happiness. Now, if you listen to public discourse on this topic for the past 10 years, you will hear messages that happiness isn't important, meaning is more important. Live a meaningful life, happiness will happen. Or let's say, don't chase happiness, because if you chase it, you won't get it, which is true, by the way, but it kind of discounts happiness as unimportant, as secondary, as a side effect, as a prize at the end of a life well lived. And that's how we approach it. There is a lot of fluff around happiness, as in our understanding of what it is, although it is a very well-researched topic. So I guess what we have to start with is it really important, actually? Like, can you admit that happiness is important? So I could go down this path for a long time, but I'll just finish with a little story. So in addition to Mindvalley, I like philanthropy. So I used to work with refugees in Malaysia for quite a lot of years. So refugees in Asia, in Malaysia, they come mostly from Myanmar. It's a lot of sadness, tragedy, losing everything. And on the side, we were building Mindvalley, which is about extraordinary, happy, fulfilled, meaningful life. And I had a chance to meet with Dalai Lama, and I asked him that question. I said, in my life, I have these two opposites, and I don't know how to reconcile them, because on one side, I see a lot of human tragedy, and I try to help them. On the other side, I'm building a company that tries to help people to live a better life. And Dalai Lama's answer was very simple. He said, Kristina, you can't help anyone if you're not happy. And this is a simple thing that a lot of us forget, that there's a huge difference what you create, what kind of mark you leave in the world, how do you solve problems, which the difference is in your state. Are you doing from the state of happiness and peace and you're being at peace and accepting of yourself? Or are you doing it from your pain, from discomfort, from maybe even anger, dissatisfaction, irritation? Your research shows that you're much more likely to become successful if your default state is happy. So while success doesn't bring you happiness, we know that happiness may bring you success, and it will be a different type of success. So that's the premise of it. But we can go deeper into that, because I know there are a lot of misunderstandings about happiness.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful what you've just shared there, because it's, to me at least, it's truth. Right? The reality is, when we start to operate from that place, we feel calmer, we're more resourceful, we're able to even be more for others, not only for ourselves. One thing that I noticed in our journey with wellness theory is when we really started to I guess get enough flow with what it is we do. I think all entrepreneurs in the middle are kind of fumbling away, trying to find where the door handle is in the dark and trying to kind of figure out the journey. And we definitely had that at the start. But when we started to connect it with that bigger purpose of, okay, well, one, what do we thrive on? What makes us happy and puts us in a more resourceful, happy state? Well, then the results of our clients got better. What we started to put out into the world got better. And like you said, it was almost like the success comes secondary to your state of being in the first place. The word become always fascinates me, because we have to be first and then whatever comes, right, based upon what it is we're being. And that just really stayed with me, because I think it just kind of re-emphasizes what you just mentioned.
And I will say a very obvious thing, but it is much more sustainable to share your overflow than to share your lack.
Yeah.
So, and I'm saying that because I did spend 10 years in philanthropy and in charity. I don't like the word charity, actually. But while I see that there is occasionally the time when you have to go beyond what you can give and what you can do. Well, I have to remind the listeners that I did survive the fall of Soviet Union, so I get it. But in my 44 years of life, there has been 1.5 occasions where some kind of, well, I don't like the word martyrdom very much, but where the concerns of the society were above personal concerns of human beings. But most of us living in developed, peaceful, economically affluent countries, we actually like to tell ourselves a lot of beautiful stories. But I want to just suggest that if you do things because you feel good, you do better things. Because I've seen a lot of people going into charity because of their own pain, because it helps to see someone in bigger pain, and it's not a very healthy approach. I've seen a lot of charity being done from guilt, from shame. And while it is still commendable, obviously, altruism in any shape and form is good, it is not sustainable. You really have to be able to take care of yourself. Like Richard Branson once said, he said, if you want to go on the sea and save the people who are drowning, it's much better to go in a ship which is in full sail and sound and is not having a leakage. That's just as simple as it is. It might sound too simple, but the thing is that we forget it, and we often tell ourselves a different story, because if you don't mind, I'll shift it to a slightly different example, because maybe somebody will recognize that. So I did have one complicated experience in my business. I had a business partner in Russian market, because Mindvalley is mostly known in the English market. We are less present in other languages, but I started a Russian business in 2009, and I had a business partner with whom we were friends initially, and the first 3 years we were doing well, but then our relationship really got horrible. It was very hard, and I was feeling unhappy. And dreaded going to work, but because of the way we started the business, it was really hard to do something about that. So on one side, we couldn't come to any agreements because we had the business split in 50-50, but we didn't see eye to eye. We were as opposite as could be. On the other side, I was very tortured with this relationship. I was literally unhappy on a daily basis going to work. So rather than making a decision to split, which would have been natural, I was telling myself that I can't do that because I have the business. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than my personal happiness. And you know how some entrepreneurs believe that they have to sacrifice themselves to their business. So I thought, okay, I'm sacrificing my well-being to this business because that's what every normal good entrepreneur will do. That's how success is being forged. That's how anything valuable, sacrifice, martyrdom. So for 3 years, I was telling myself that I have business, I have clients, I have partners, I have a mission. So because of that, I have to bring myself as a sacrifice to that business. It was going on for 3 years until it became unbearable. And then when it became unbearable, I just couldn't go anymore. And I thought I'd rather go bankrupt. I'd rather start everything from scratch than keep doing that. So I suggested that we separate with this business partner. And it was a really long decision. The next morning when I woke up after this decision, I looked at myself in the mirror and I felt like I had wings behind my back. And then it dawned on me that my story of sacrifice for a big good was actually an excuse, because all that was happening, I was afraid. I was scared to be alone. So rather than facing the fact that I'm afraid, I came up with this amazing story about a bigger good, about that being my obligation. And we often do that because, as I said, in my 44 years, yes, there are situations where sometimes you have to put a bigger good above yourself. When the Soviet Union was collapsing, it was thanks to the bravery of a lot of people that it actually did happen. But how many times do you see an evil empire collapse in your life? Usually you tell that story of martyrdom in a really everyday life scenario, unless you work in rescue services. Yeah. It is not very likely that you have to sacrifice your own well-being for anything. Yeah. And it is much more likely that if you are good, you will do much better in the world.
Where does somebody find the courage to do that? Because there's a lot of guilt involved with that as well, isn't it? A lot of people feel guilty for putting themselves before, whether it be family members or work and this kind of thing. So it's for somebody listening, practically, how does somebody get the courage, and how does somebody become free of the emotions that could be keeping them in that space?
Yeah, in the society where we idealize sacrifice for anything, right? Or putting the society first. Well, it's it's those movies that we like to watch, Avengers and Superman and all of that. It's cool, it's beautiful, it's a fairy tale as well. But it is not an easy question to answer, because for you to have the fortitude to actually declare that this is what I believe is right, you really need to figure out one relationship in your life, a relationship with yourself, because you really have to know that what you're doing is standing firm for your values, for what you believe in, and not anything else. A simple example was when me and Vision decided to separate, we got a lot of criticism, obviously. It's too much. In fact, I was surprised how many people that I didn't know existed had an opinion about that and thought that it had impacted them in any way. But of course, the hardest was the people that we loved, our parents and our children. It is, again, philosophy and humor is what helps. Philosophically speaking, when two people separate, it is about their relationship. Any relationships in life, we like to bundle them up into this huge, big, messy ball. But in reality, it's if two people separate, the other people in their life don't have to suffer if you make it your goal, because it's about separation of two people. But Vishen's parents are still my in-laws. I still go to the airport at 12 at midnight to pick them up, and then curse in the morning that I didn't have enough sleep, because we separated with the man, not with his family, right? It didn't change anything for my parents, for children, but everybody still has a relationship. So for us to stay true to that decision, we needed to remind ourselves that it was about my values, about what I value in my life. And it's not about how other people react to them, because their reaction is their, well, it is theirs. Nothing changes about them, but they react to something which they see, which they observe, which is actually between two other people. So can I stay calm and allow people to go through that journey and not interfere and not get triggered or upset that they have an opinion about what I decide about my life? Whatever I decide about my life, okay, separation aside, about my career, about writing or not writing a book, about going to university, about choosing what I do, about giving up a job which is well-paying and stable and doing something risky. Whatever I decide, it's my decision, it's my relationship with that decision, with that goal, with that mission. But whether we like it or not, people in our life, especially the closest people, and occasionally not so close people, will have an opinion about that. And they will somehow interpret that your decision is anything about them, which it is not. So while the other people maybe don't mind, you don't mind so much, but the people that you love, that's the hard thing. So how do you find this fortitude? You really have to figure out your relationship with yourself. You have to know what you are. You have to know what your values are. And more than that, you have to be at peace with that. Because if you discover something about yourself, I like to call it dragons. We all have our dragons in the basement or in the attic, wherever it is, in the darkest corners. But when you find your dragon, you have a choice. Either you accept it and you know that this is just what it is, and can I live with that? One of my dragons is perfectionism. I used to say I'm improving perfectionist, but no, I will always be perfectionist. I'm learning to live with that dragon. It's an annoying dragon, trust me. Or you have a choice of actually kicking it out of the house, but first you have to actually accept it anyway, before you can kick it out of your house. So if you want to have the strength and fortitude to do what is right, you first have to figure out your relationship with yourself, come to peace with yourself, know yourself well enough, know your values, know what you are, know your dragons, be at peace with them, and have decided, I have decided to live with that. That's what it is. I'm sorry. It's about me and my dragon. It has nothing to do with you. I know you react, and I'm still here for you, no matter how you react.
I love that. I love it. One of our mentors always says, live in your values. Everything comes second to what you value. When you're setting up your life and you're, creating and experiencing, that needs to be the first filter that it goes through. And I think that's so true hearing it from your perspective as well, because it's too easy to give up our own inner authority to other people's opinions. And that essentially leads to emotional unrest, mental health issues down the line as well, potentially, when it gets compounded and all stacked up, and our sense of self starts to almost disintegrate in a way. So coming home to ourselves is so powerful. And I really hope anybody listening takes the time to reflect after this session on who you are, what you value, because it's really your GPS for what you're doing in life. Is there any...
It's a journey, actually. It's not that you will know it forever, because your values change, you change, circumstances change.
Exactly. Is there any tip you would give to somebody about how to figure out their values? Because I know there's so many different ways to elicit values.
It would be a long story from my side, because I go so deep into that. I've written a book about that. I have a course about that. So I wouldn't be I think it's beyond me now to give simple answers to that.
What's the name of the book? What's the book?
It's not published yet. We are going through the first round of editing. It's ready, but it's a process. It has to be. It has to materialize in real life. It's called Becoming Flawsome, and it is about that journey. But I can give you very simply. There is one skill which is necessary, which is awareness, and without going too deep into this topic, once you switch on your awareness, you don't even have to try to live well, properly, right? You will start noticing things. And by noticing things, this will give you the reason and often the motivation, even intrinsic motivation, to change things. Once you keep noticing the same stuff over and over again, sooner or later you'll say, okay, that's enough, I'm going to change it. So awareness is a prerequisite for any change, for any transformation. I'll, like, you know, a little bit out of context, but what I can say is that a lot of the times we are delusional about our relationship with ourselves, about our relationship with the world. It's a little bit of it's the way our mind works. So basically you see the reality through the lens of your understanding of what reality is. And the nature of delusion is that you are usually not aware that you are lying to yourself, or not lying like in a bad way, but you're not honest with yourself, or you're not completely sincere with yourself. It's a slightly better word. So you need awareness to get this veil off your eyes and to start noticing the truth. But the three qualities that I strongly recommend you cultivate, and it will be beyond the scope of this, I mean, beyond the time that we are given. The three qualities that I strongly advocate for are definitely courage. You will need courage. If you don't have courage, you don't go down this path. You will need kindness and honesty, of course. So honesty and kindness is something that have to go in a pair, because honesty without kindness is cruel, is mean. Kindness without honesty is meek. So you need both kindness and honesty, but also courage. I'll quote Cinderella's mother from one of the last movies with this beautiful blue dress. She said, have courage and be kind. And I think it's a really, really great advice.
Nice. I think we just found our podcast title.
Yeah, maybe. That sounds like a good title to me.
No, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Definitely. And I'd be very interested to know your your thoughts and your opinion on it. If someone, obviously, they become aware, they really start to find out who they are, their true selves, and kind of really go with that. I'd love to know what you feel would be the kind of impact on the world on that. Like, what would be the impact for that individual, but also what sort of difference would that make in the world for someone who finds their true self, who really goes step by step every single day, living their true self with complete awareness?
So yeah, awareness is an interesting topic, of course, but my observation is that if you switch it on, the awareness, and you're honest with yourself and you're willing to be honest, and honesty and sincerity actually a painful topic to go into. Once you start digging it, you suddenly see how much we romanticize the idea of honesty and how little of it actually, well, there is a lot of honesty, but let's say how much deception there is in our life. But that aside, what will happen is that you will face a lot of unpleasant emotions, such as shame, anger, regret. You will face all of that. So another thing that I like to give to my students is, I call it emotional literacy. We are never told how to feel. So just making a little pause here, how we are told is usually how not to feel. Don't cry, don't be angry, don't be upset, don't worry, right? Don't throw a tantrum. We're never told how to feel. So we grow up with what I call emotional analgesia, learning how not to feel. So I do think that emotional literacy, and by literacy, I mean just understanding how it works. You know, you can learn to read. What kind of books you read is your own choice. But literacy, emotional literacy, it's something that we should start teaching everyone, starting from elementary school. And that is something that you will need in this journey, because when you find out truths about yourself, for you to accept it, you have to be at peace with the fact that it will probably elicit unpleasant emotion. So if, of course, I brought a very simple example, that one of my dragons is perfectionist. But there are dragons which are more hard to accept. For example, if you understand that, I'll bring a slightly dramatic example. If you understand that you are not a monoamorous type of person, of course, nowadays it is a little bit more free, but generally still our society doesn't give you this kind of rule book how to navigate that field. So rather than accepting something which is so complicated, or let's say if you discover that you're gay, accepting it, I believe, is a hard process, because you understand it's going to make your life not by the book. There will be less support, less information, less maybe fewer role models to follow. So if you discover things like that, which are more questionable, you know, or not so simple, perfectionism is simple, but let's say if you discover that, oh God, I can't come up with any example, but something which is not so black and white, then of course accepting that side of you is not going to be an easy thing, especially if you don't have psychotherapists to go to, a good psychotherapist to go to. So you will face the situation. Or for example, as a mother, I'm so passionate in my work that sometimes I start beating myself up for not being a good mother. So if you as a mother, as a young woman, have to make a choice between being a good mother and being a professional, and you feel inside that actually professional is so important for you, how do you feel about the deprioritized role of a mother, which society expects you to prioritize above everything else? This kind of decisions are hard to take, because and all of us, once in a blue moon or once in a lifetime, face a decision between what society considers is right and good and successful, and what your heart wants. And when you have that choice, how do you feel about that choice, or about deprioritizing the other choice? Of course, there will be a lot of unpleasant emotions, and you have to figure out how to work with those emotions properly, so that they don't stick and they don't damage you, and they move on, and you get to move on in your life. But how will it be? How will you impact the world? I like this one saying: hurt people hurt people. If you are a happy, content person, I bet you can't do bad in the world. You just can't, because what you have to share is love, contentment, happiness, you know, meaning, whatever it is for you.
Beautifully answered. Great examples as well, definitely. Listen, Kristina, I am being mindful of time for our listeners here today, and you've already shared so much gold in this conversation so far, but I'm curious to know if there's anything else that you would add to this conversation that you think our listeners need to know.
I think I'd like to, you did quote Oscar Wilde earlier, that life is too important to be taken seriously. I'll quote him again, and that could be the ending of this conversation. Love for yourself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. So I think that figuring out that relationship is probably the most important thing, and the best thing you can do to the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you. Great way to end the show on. So before we do finish and wrap up, just let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to reach out to you, or just find a bit more about what you do.
So as a co-founder of Mindvalley, of course, you will find me there, but we have a lot of teachers and authors. So I'm not there always on the feed and everywhere, but you'll find me there. If you want directly, then Instagram is where I write, where I don't have anyone between me and the people. I write, I occasionally answer, and I read the comments and the messages. So that's where you'll find me. And my Instagram is Kristina Mand, although my name is not very easily spelled. It's Estonian way with a K.
Okay, we'll put the links.
Yeah, we'll put all the links in the show notes so people can easily find you and get hold of you.
Yeah, and they can stay tuned for your book that's going to be coming out that you mentioned earlier as well. So we're very excited for that.
Definitely. So obviously, Kristina, I just want to say thank you so much for obviously taking the time to be on our show today. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you, and we've been so excited to be speaking to someone who's made such a huge impact in the world and had such a hand in building Mindvalley, which is like we've been following for so long. So thank you for your time today. It's been absolutely amazing speaking to you.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I know I'm a little talkative sometimes.
It's
perfect.
Cool. I'm more than happy to bring you back on for more conversations. Maybe when
I go,
comes out.
I go on my rants and I just keep like,
you're in your flow. You're in your flow. We love it.
Thank you.